Okay, cool. I think that's enough spooling up. Whatever. There'll be a YouTube video posted later on today after this is all done, and then people can go there and gawk at us awkwardly or
Okay.
with much appreciation. Well, for I don't know, this is a very early stream for me, so I'm very excited to get this out of the way. So we can go and talk to some more people. But right now we're talking to Arrowspeed. Hi.
Hello.
Is there can you tell us who you are and why you're running for CSM this year?
Sure. I am a member of fraternity. I've been playing Eve for about 10 years. Have gone through the new player experiences that most people go through. And I do remember my first few months playing with two other players, just the three of us, and we were in the same time zone and we just logged in together pretty much every day and figured out the game from that starting point, and then just moved on to other game adventures, like most people do, starting with a corp and maybe a small alliance here or there, and ended up running a renter program for Norris, as you probably know, the exec of fraternity, and I have been doing that. I'd have to look it up to see how many years. Many years I've been running his renter program, and then expanded into quite a few other space jobs that I can talk about later. But I've remained loyal to fraternity over many years and still enjoy that part of the game. But it's exciting to me to expand and have visibility and maybe even some influence over a larger chunk of the game.
Cool. So when you say you're so like looking through your CSM posts, you do talk about quite of like it sounds like you have quite a few responsibilities in fraternity. And running the rental program. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about running the rental program for fraternity? Because that's something that's I've heard good and bad things about in regards to
Yeah,
just being part of like a null sec block. Like renters are bad, or renters are just like a needed
yes,
thing. Can you tell us a little bit
I
more
run
about
into
that?
that a lot.
Yeah. How- yeah, just tell us a little bit more, and we can dive a little bit deeper into that.
Sure. Um, and I'll try not to be defensive about the renter program. There are pros and cons of it, and I understand the points of view of people who don't like it. Um, I do like it, from both a personal standpoint as well as I think it's a good thing.
Oh, oh no. uh, what happened? Okay.
But
Uh,
game, Eve is a big sandbox game, and the whole idea of a sandbox game is that you have lots of choices. So renting is a choice that people have. I run the program like a business. It's there to make a profit for fraternity, yes, but the method I use of making that profit is to understand the needs of our customers, spend a lot of time with them. I'm very attentive to their questions and their requests, and try to provide everything I can that gives them a good renting experience. And I think we have a good reputation, as far as the program itself, and that many people want to rent systems. I realize that a certain number of those are probably spies, um, but I also think that I have a really good set of renters who like where they are, like how they're treated, and then I get the advantage of seeing the program flourish and bringing ISK into the alliance that we need to serve our line members, like fueling structures and buying structures for them and giving them a good space for them to play on with the particular style of play that they want to have. So I think the renter program is um, justifiably successful and also of benefit to players with many different kinds of preferences on how they want to play the game.
Awesome. Yeah, like I know it's like for me as somebody who lives in wormholes quite a bit, like like renting does have a little bit of a stigma as bad stereotype to it, but for people who can't own or probably are unable to own their own sovereignty, it is nice to be able to get access to that nullsec content without having to plop down billions of worth of structures and other resources when you just ask one of the big blocks, hey, I'll pay you a little bit of money and then let me just camp in your backyard for a little bit. That's great.
Yeah.
um Speaking of CSM, with your experience basically being the the renter mogul for frats, how would you you have obviously a lot of experience being a leader in the game and helping with a whole bunch of different communities. How what would you like to see being on the CSM in order to improve these communities experiences in Eve?
Um, One of the things that I'm really wrestling right now with is managing the infrastructure of two big regions and half of another region. And it used to be a lot easier than it is now with Equinox and then Legion following that. There's a lot of time that I have to spend just keeping everything running and adjusting when there are changes to how the infrastructure works. Even a simple thing like a change to the the amount of power and workforce that a particular upgrade uses, that then affect that ripples throughout the infrastructure and requires some work to adjust to that. So I most people who play Eve would rather be doing something other than administrative work. And I do a lot of administrative work, which I like, but not everybody in the game likes that. And so one of the things I wonder about is, could there be some ways to just reduce the manual work involved of managing an infrastructure so that the players can spend more time doing what they might rather do in the game?
Or for people like myself who've never had to deal with like nullsec infrastructure, what goes into running infrastructure in nullsec? Like I know there's probably like fuel blocks. What else might go into running frats nullsec?
Yeah, well, I just run the renter portion of Frats Nullsec. But it's the answer to your question would be the same in either case. Um, so you have to figure out how you want to distribute those two variables, the power and the workforce that are in a system, using the tools that you have available to do that. And there are multiple tools for shifting around the power and workforce that you have. You can't you can't make more appear. So you're just moving workforce and power around between systems. And so you have to figure out what upgrades you want in the different systems, how much power and workforce they require, and then how to supply that power and workforce to that system, and then how to manage the systems you took it away from. Or there's other ways to do it other than that, where you're shifting the mix of power and workforce, and you have to look at the exact quantities you have, what upgrades will fit within those constraints, and then figure that out for each individual system that you're managing. And they interact with each other. So you make a change here, and then it'll affect this other system over here, maybe. And it gets to be rather complex when, because one single change has a ripple effect.
Cool. Obviously running for CSM, you can't just interact with just frat space as I know you're very aware of. How would you talk a little, you wanted to talk a little bit about the new player experience? What do you think are barriers that are preventing from people undocking to go and fly spaceships?
Yes, I do like to talk about that because even though I've been playing a long time, I may have more vivid memories of being a new player than other people have, because I got really frustrated about it. I guess everybody does to some degree, but I still remember them all. And um, I think that one of the things that causes the players not to unduck, of course, is fear. That answer comes up a lot. And there are things that have been done already to make it a little bit easier for new players to kind of deal with, okay, I just lost a venture. What do I do? And so that, I think, is sort of a well understood experience. The part of being a new player is kind of like medium new. And I run into this a lot as a Diplo because one of my responsibilities is recruiting corps who want to come into fraternity. And one of the things I run into is the player who's kind of gotten over the the fear of undocking, and now they've got this giant ambitious plan of something that they want to do with their corp. They usually have a corp. Actually, often they have an alliance that they're running, and they have some special thing that they really want to do that's going to make them famous throughout Eve, not necessarily realizing that it typically takes a pretty long time for a corp or an alliance to reach the stage of their big dreams and big plans. And so they come to me and they want to have 2 or 3 corps come into fraternity. They want all these specialized roles. They want special consideration or maybe a few systems where they can do the special things that they want to do. And it's often a very elaborate, wonderful sounding plan. And I have to go back to them and say, we can't do that amount of customization for each corp that comes into fraternity or each alliance that comes into Winter Coalition. So you kind of have to start lower and then grow. And I'll make recommendations like if you're running an alliance of 20 people, I'm exaggerating a little
Yeah.
bit, usually it's a little more than that. But if you're running a small alliance, and you're willing to consolidate into one corp, just move all those players into one corp, and then come back to me, I can invite you into fraternity. And they don't want to do that. There's some kind of an emotional attachment or sentimental attachment they have to their alliance. And there's really not much I can do to help them. And I'd like to see kind of what things that can be done for the player at that stage, kind of medium new, and they think they're huger than they actually are, and trying to come into a big block nullsec alliance, they have to be further along. And I don't, I mean, I would love to be a mentor to each one of those players and help them kind of walk through, but I don't have time to do that. And I can't invite them really into Winter Coalition until they've gone through some of those stages themselves. And I don't have a place to refer them. I can't tell you, go look at these 3 features within the game, walk through those, and then come back to me. I don't have a really good answer for that. That's really just a problem or an issue that I think probably has a solution that somebody could think of or we could think of as a team working together.
What sort of customizations have these ambitious mini alliances, mini corps have come towards asking for? Like, are they asking for like certain sovereignty upgrades in their systems, or what has that experience been like for you?
They may want, several of their own systems of Sov that would be unrealistic for us to give to an alliance coming in when we just have we would not have enough Sov to be able to do that for people if they're small. So that's one of the things. Sometimes they want a very complex organization of a bunch of small corp or a bunch of small corps or a bunch of small alliances that are specialized in these different things. And one of the things they run into is they need lots more wallet divisions, for example, than you get in a single corp. So they want to have these specialized wallet divisions to go with some special project that they would like to do. So those are just a couple of examples of what I run into.
Um, well, so we're you're sort of looking at like the medium newer player slash group. As a CSM member, what would you be trying to do to advocate for them on the CSM? Like, would you be trying to hope that there might be a way for, like, I don't know, maybe there's like an air career program out there that's more suited towards like people who've been playing the game for longer than maybe 2 3 months, or how would you see
Yeah,
supporting
I,
these players?
I guess the same kind of thing that you might see, like you said, for a new player, just it kind of walking you through the steps. Okay, go do this, and then go do this, run this mission, shoot that many pirates, different different series of things where they can work step by step. Only for the corp, it would be, grow your corp to this many members and assign some, a certain number of directors. But be careful, don't have too many directors because that gives too much power to too many people. Oh, and spend some time thinking about if you want to give out shares. What are you going to do about a backup CEO in case something happens to you? Do you have players ready to step in with the right roles? Um, Make sure you've thought about the jobs that you need to have done, because if as a new CEO early on in a corp, if you're doing everything yourself, pretty soon you're going to be overwhelmed. So if you start early when those jobs are small, fueling, for example, if you have two structures, you can assign somebody to be responsible to fuel. You could probably fuel them yourself, but assign somebody to do it, because as you grow, and this is of course designed for the player who wants to grow and has big ideas, as you grow, you won't be able to do that by yourself. So start now and start to assign things to players.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about maybe there being, instead of just being like a single player like air career program, like having something for a corp level sort of thing. So
Yeah,
like, because I
yeah,
also own my own C5 corp, and we've just hit 200 people or 200 characters in our corporation, and it would be really cool to have some sort of guidance to go from like, hey, we're I want to go from 200 to now maybe 1,000. What would be some sort of things that are in the game that could help me guides to meet whatever goal that I have in the back of my head? That would actually
right.
be really really interesting and cool.
And there could be, of course, game mechanics thing that went along with it. For example, right now, you can set up a title in your corp for somebody, as well as give them specific roles that they would need if they held that title. Um, but it's limited, first of all, how many of these you can set up. And also, there could be some in-game tools that would be used by that particular role. So for example, and again, not a big deal when you're small, but the tools would be really useful to have in place when you're small, because then as you grow, you already have the tools. So one example I thought of was a Diplo is going to be getting a lot of people coming to them asking to solve some particular case. So I have a case management system as with my role as Diplo that I operate outside of the game using a spreadsheet. Um, but I developed it myself. And so it would be nice if there was already a case management tool available in game that could just be used, or a fueling tracking. There's fueling tracking information in the game, but there could be a single tool that just pulled that information into the tool and then also adds to it a place to track, okay, who's going to be fueling which structures, how much fuel do we need per month, that kind of thing. So those are just two examples I thought of game mechanics that would also help with that objective.
I think that would be like now you're making me feel like more impassioned about like what are some of the things I want to do for my corporation, because that's sort of like for a lot of people that's like your next big step to becoming, you know, like the next warmonger, next industrialist. And Eve is where you're starting to organize other individuals to help you reach a collective goal. And it would be really really nice to have some sort of like, I don't know, like a corp or like infrastructure updates to the game so that we can manage that stuff in game rather than having to use spreadsheets outside of the game. I think that would be a really strong case to be a CS like on the CSM 20s, because you obviously have a huge wealth of experience running like the fraternity like infrastructure stuff, and I think that would make you a really strong candidate to give good suggestions that wouldn't just help nullsec people, but anybody who wants to run like their own corporation and grow. Like that's pretty amazing. Um, cool. Ideas. How do I? So when were having a little side chat before this, you did say, "How do I approach finding solutions to things?" What are some sort of solutions or some problems that you think you would need to solve on the CSM in order to help the greater Eve community?
Sorry, I missed the last part of your sentence. Could
Oh
you say
yeah,
the
it's okay.
last sentence again?
How you did say how do I approach finding solutions to things? What are some sort of problems you've had to solve recently, and how what are some things you would like to solve as being a CSM leader?
Got it. So talking about kind of how I approach solving some of the problems we've already talked about. Well, what's my overall approach to that kind of problem solving? Um, and I don't think this is unique, but I think it's something that not everybody does, and I think is really important. So if I'm looking at a new problem, I make sure that I'm looking at all sides of that problem, the different opinions people have. And usually when people express an opinion, they either tell you the disadvantage of something or they tell you the advantage of something. And then an argument ensues, and you have the people who are talking about the disadvantages talking, and then you have the people who are focused on the advantages talking. What I think is really important to do in that situation is make sure that you're looking at the problem with both of those in mind. So most problems, if there's controversy about it, have a series of solutions, each one of which has advantages and disadvantages. And so if you can put those together, I think it drives to a more useful solution because it's more realistic, and then you don't end up getting hit with all the disadvantages that you hadn't talked about beforehand. And as a Diplo, I deal with that a lot. People come and you've got multiple sides. You've got this person saying, I want you to make this rule. And then the other side saying, no, I don't want you to make that rule. That would be a terrible rule. And so then I'm making that judgment call, which person. What I'd rather do is have each one of them look at the advantages and disadvantages of several solutions and consider which of these answers has the best mix of advantages and disadvantages. Another thing I've observed is even in a game, and this is a game, don't
Yep.
forget.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy to. I've had those moments where I've been throwing my keyboard against the wall, saying I will never log into this stupid game again. And of course, I'm back the next day, just like everybody. Um, but we do tend to get pretty wrapped up in Eve, and so we have all of these emotions associated with them. And then the emotions start to get tied to whatever we think the best answer is. And then we're just arguing about, who's right and everybody wanting to be right rather than working together to find an answer that's going to work and has the best cost benefit. Here are the costs, here are the benefits, here are the disadvantages, here are the advantages. And if you frame it that way, sorry, I have allergies,
It's all good.
which sometimes affect my voice. Wait, another sip of water. So if one person can be doing that, that's great, and that's how I like to think about things. But if a group can be thinking that way, that seems like it would help. Another thing I like to do when we're talking about various alternatives is to, and I'm going to give a couple of examples, is to look for some kind of a different solution than we've been talking about that's kind of a mix, or some kind of a creative way of approaching the problem that isn't necessarily what's on the table to talk about at the moment. Let me give a couple of examples. One of the best decisions I made in this game, there are two really good decisions I made in the game. One of them was when I was told by a friend, you need to put aside that alliance you're trying to lead, and consolidate into a corp and go be a corp for a while. That was keeping me awake at night. A decision that was hard to make, but I made it. Best decision I ever made. The other decision that was the second best I made was to merge with another corp. That's also very hard to do because most people are very tied to their particular corp. They started at the beginning of the game. There's a sentimental attachment to that corp. So I had a conversation with the person, CEO of the corp. We both wanted to merge. So both the CEOs talked. And we were talking about, well, who's going to give up their corp and merge into the other corp? Finally, I said, we're both going to have to make a big sacrifice and get skin in the game, or it's not going to work. It can't be one person giving in and the other person not having to give in. So we decided that one person was going to take the CEO seat of the corp that was being merged into, and the other person was going to give up their corp. And both of those are things most people would just say, no, we're not going to do it. And if the other corp had said, no, I'm not willing to make that either one of those sacrifices, we wouldn't have merged. But he said, you can take the CEO seat, but you got to give up your corp. And I agreed to that. And I had not only a sleepless night, but a tearful one,
Oh no.
giving up my corp. But I took the CEO seat in the corp that we merged into, and that we both had skin in the game, and that was a very successful merge and one I never regretted.
Yeah, coming up, like I think that would be really good for somebody who would want to be on the CSM. Being able to work with others in a very constructive way that benefits more than just one person's ego. And it's good to hear that you've had to deal with some really hard decisions and you deal with that on a day by day basis already to begin with, which is awesome. That's something that I definitely would be supporting as being like a CSM leader for sure. Have
And I
you?
have one other
Oh
example
yeah,
I'd like to share.
please do.
This is a little bit less of an emotional one than that one was, but the expansion upgrades that have recently come out that generate data and relic sites outside of the system it's installed in. So they can come up in systems 5 jumps away, as much as 5 jumps away. And okay, that's great, but we found there was a problem because we have alliances that each own their own SOV. And so if somebody installs that expansion upgrade within 5 jumps of the SOV of another alliance, one other winter co-alliance, some of those sites are going to spawn in the other alliance's space. And so the question was, if I paid for that upgrade, I should be able to go into your SOV and take those sites. But the alliance in whose systems they were spawning said, I didn't choose that upgrade. I don't like your sites spawning in my space. And so you shouldn't be able to install that upgrade nearby, or you should let me have all those sites that your upgrade's installing. I didn't tell you to install it. So we went around and around and we had the same argument over and over. The I guess I thought of it as a creative solution and it worked really well. The answer we came up with was, okay, the person who installs the upgrade is allowed to go into your space and take those sites that they see there. They aren't allowed to just camp there and take everything, but they can go in there and take a bunch of sites and go out. Meanwhile, you as the SOV owner, if you're there and you see one of those sites spawn, you can take that as well. Um, the the person who didn't install the upgrade can't go into the other guy's SOV, but the person who did install the upgrade can go into the SOV where they're spawning. And that seemed to be a solution. I've had zero Diplo issues after making that decision. Um, so that's an example of kind of taking a slightly different route than you originally started arguing about.
That's awesome. No, but I used to be part of Goon Swarm. I think I got scooped up by Ascendance Rising or ASCII in my first month of playing Eve, and I remember people getting really pissed off that I was taking their data sites in places I wasn't supposed to. So I'm really happy that you were able to figure that out in a way that made everybody in Winterco happy, which is really good. Um, I know you wanted to keep this about half an hour. We do have a couple of people asking questions. Is there anything else you want to talk about specifically that you wanted to chat before we start taking questions?
I just wanted to make kind of a summary statement of my kind of position.
Yeah, of course.
And as a big block player, um, where I think not probably not entirely unique, but one of the things about me that I think I want people to know is that yes, I'm a big block player, but I really do care about the new player experience because I think that's an advantage to everybody in the game. We all need to have people logging in. We all need to be refreshed with new players. And so caring about that new player experience, I'm proud of that. And I'm also proud of the fact that I'm very much in favor of keeping this a true sandbox game. So I don't know very much about wormholes. I played in a wormhole a little bit, but I don't really remember. um, but I also think it's really important that wormholes are a place players can go and enjoy playing the sandbox part of the sandbox game. So I just wanted to kind of state that as my overarching position.
Yeah, and like you were saying before, you want people to join Winterco, even if they are like brand new and they have huge ambitions. And it sounds like you actually do care about like other people besides Winterco, which is super important for people who are aspiring to be a CSM member, which is really amazing. Couple questions. Somebody did ask, is there a place for small units corps in a null alliance? One that's ones that don't wants to grow but wants to specialize at low numbers and dedication.
Well, we have room for that. And we do have some specialized corps that are providing a very specific service and remain small deliberately providing that service. Um, Generally, those are small and experienced at that particular thing, like maybe building specialized ships in huge quantities, that kind of thing. Um, or really, really good logistics pilots, that sort of thing too. And there's other examples. So yes, there is room for that here.
Um, as a null block admin, do you think there should be a ceiling for how large a null alliance slash coalition should be, and how could that ceiling be implemented without unduly making the game tedious? Or is tedium a good way to restrict the growth of alliances slash coalitions?
Well, that's an interesting question that I hadn't expected. I guess I would say that as a general rule, it seems like the CSM is and the CCP is already taking the approach in general to encourage a particular thing to happen like that without actually just making it a hard rule. So you could just say, once you get to this size as an alliance, the game won't let you grow any bigger. But better than that is just one of the things that actually is having an effect, I think, on how big you can grow is just how much trouble it takes to manage an infrastructure. So I'm talking a little against what I already said. But that kind of thing, just adjusting the game mechanics to encourage the behavior you want rather than forcing it on people.
And a little bit of a different question. What views, if any, do you have on the current state of the lore and narrative of Eve that's being driven by CCP?
The lore and narrative, well, I'll be honest, I'm really glad it's there. And I used to write stories, Eve stories. There was I forgot the name of the group. They had story contests, Eve story contests. And you would write a story that kind of followed the lore of the game. But it was a fiction story. You just kind of made up a story that used that as its background. And I won a couple of their awards for my stories and
Cool.
loved writing them. But I don't read all of the lore associated with each of the different, like, if I'm on a mission, I don't necessarily read the whole thing about the lore behind that
Yeah.
mission. So, but I think it's important that it's there, even though most players probably don't read all of it. They read enough of it so that it makes the game real, feel real.
Yeah, the person who asked, he's a big lore fanatic, and he's always like hoping that like future CSM members are going to be like wanting to help drive a little bit more of the lore side of Eve, which I think is still important. Like you said, it is a sandbox, and we as the players are the main like content drivers for that. But like having some sort of background lore that's floating by hopefully brings in players and keeps certain players around.
And I
Um,
do think it's important not to violate that lore, not to put in place something that doesn't match with
right.
what that lore has been.
Um, speaking of breaking that lore, how do you feel about cat ears? Because I know people care deeply about implementing cat ears into the game.
By cat ears, I don't know what you mean.
Oh, like cosmetic items that may not be
Oh,
following the.
so you could dress yourself up with cat ears.
Yes, there you
Is
go.
that what you mean?
Yes.
Oh,
How would you be for more silly cosmetics, or would you be against more silly cosmetics?
more silly cosmetics. I guess I would be for more silly cosmetics because of my observation of how many silly memes there are on Reddit. The people like that, and if they like it, why not?
Yeah. How much is on CPP to promote change? I guess, yeah, CPP to promote change, and how much is on the player base to promote change with regards to new players sticking with Eve?
Yeah, I was thinking about there had been some discussion about toxic language and how much that might affect people playing the game if there's too much of it. And I use that an example because my answer to that question is I feel like CCP has some responsibility down on extreme toxic language. And they already do that. They can kick players and ban players for using extremely toxic language. But that it can't just be CCP. Each alliance um, needs to have their own standards. And be responsible enough to enforce those standards. So in Winterco, we have standards that are probably different from other alliances, and we enforce those standards that we have. So it's a partnership between CCP and the leadership within the game. So I think the same thing applies with other things that might be requested. It's like, well, if that new player experience can be, I was talking about, corps who had kind of the medium new. So there are some game mechanics that we talked about already that can be put in the game, but that can't be the only thing. So if that's important to me, it's on me. And if I should carve out the time to be able to do this, or maybe I can start a group of people who do this. But the kind of the mentorship portion of that, I think would fall on the players, the leadership to do that part of it. So it's partnership between CCP and the in-game leadership.
Yeah, like that's one thing that I'm also finding as somebody who's aspiring to grow my own corp. That I am leaning pretty heavily on like the more experienced player base than I am on any sort of like in-game mechanics to help me like push to grow my corp counts past 300, 400, 500. But yeah, I think it would be really nice to implement some sort of changes in order to make that infrastructure for growing these corporations and these alliances a little bit easier from like a player sand base. Um, we're approaching 45 minutes. Do you want to keep on going or
Are there other questions?
there
Happy to
are?
answer
Yeah,
other
yeah.
questions,
They're
as
like
long as they're not too hard.
um these are like actually great questions, so it
Okay.
makes me happy. As CSM, do you think you will be advocating for CCP to help sprinkle lore around more in the game in the form of item descriptions, landmarks, and the like? Or would this be a low priority for you? Understandable if so.
It's something I hadn't thought about. And it would depend on how much trouble it would be to do that. I mean, I would guess the mechanics are already there for a lot of that lore. It just needs to get some tender loving care and have some people really working on that part. So if it, a missing piece of data for me is how much for how many people is that important?
Yeah.
And if important to a reasonably large group of people, yeah, I would advocate for that.
Um, are you a fan of balance changes within the game just for the sake of change rather than being in line with any lore and something being broken?
Um, I guess one of the things I think I have not been totally happy. Everybody loves to bash CCP. um, and one of the things I really got close to throwing my keyboard against the wall about was just how quickly we got so many changes with Equinox. So Equinox came, I finally solved that problem, and it was really hard to solve because I have an additional variable in the renter program of having to price each of these systems. So I had to figure out the pricing. So I did that, and I spent quite a lot of time getting it all set up. And then there was a change that messed up everything, and I had to start over again. And there was just too many changes on top of each other. So as a general rule, I might ask for just a more controlled rollout of changes so that you don't have that happening where people are just overwhelmed with so many changes. Um, and the same with the lore. I mean, you wouldn't want to mess with it too much because we already have lore. But so it's a matter of kind of fitting whatever you're doing next into that.
Yeah, like it's good to have changes in the game just to keep things like fresh and new for players. But it would be kind of fun to have some sort of like weird wonky shenanigans. Like last night I was talking to another CSM candidate and we were talking about the cenotaph being oddly strong for for what it does, but it's creating some like interesting ways of playing the game and doing things in a different way. Cool.
And it can't be forced. You know, if you try to manufacture lore to a change you already decided to make, if you have to work too hard to do that, maybe you need to change the lore first and give it some
Yeah.
time first
Yeah.
before, yeah, before
Cool.
the change.
Awesome. This was a really good interview. I was really happy to get to chat with you about this after reading your CSM application because you are a huge deal when it comes to just keeping like one of the largest null blocks running, and it's very cool to get a little bit more insights on what's your gripes and how you would want to help out the greater Eve community. Is there any last things you would like to chat about, say to the people at home?
Remember, this is a game. The ISK is just play money, really. It's not real. Have fun.
Yeah, that's
Those would be
great.
my main messages.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on tonight, Arrow. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge. And I will definitely I might message you about some corpse stuff because that you talking about made me all goosebumply and very excited. So all
Cool.
right, have yourself a great night.
All right, you too.
Oh my god, she was lovely. Oh, oh my god. I didn't. I like. I was just like, okay, well, it's cool to like oh like I don't know who this person is, and then I looked at their like CSM application on like the forums. Like, oh my god, I'm talking to like an alliance leader. This is crazy. Sorry. Sorry, Ennett. Um, yeah, no, it was a very fun conversation to have. The things that Arrow was talking about are all things that I didn't really think about as being an issue. When we think about like CSM, we think about like the individual player experience. But one thing that I didn't really think about, which now this conversation got me thinking about, was just like, okay, so like people have like we have people who want to be like content creators in Eve, and it's like how do we push them from being like this individual person to now like pushing and helping with their grand ambitions. um so it would be really cool to have somebody on the CSM that would be trying to push for, helping ambitious people grow their corps and alliances, so that we do get more content being driven inside the game. That made me very excited, and I know I said like, oh, I got a little goosebumpy. I literally got goosebumpy. Like it was very cool to listen to her talk about. Just like I know it's like a lot of like spreadsheets talk, and but I feel like a lot of the time we talk about like dreads and we talk about like ships, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about like infrastructure and running things, and it's very cool to hear it from somebody who's like they've been doing this for 10 years, which is pretty amazing. Love to be friends. Okay, sounds good. So yeah, very exciting, very cool. I am looking forwards to hanging out with or talking to her a little bit more because I do have some really interesting questions. I'm just going to ban this person because they don't actually follow my stream. Um, and that was definitely a bot. Um, so I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Um, I will be talking to um, who is the next person on my list? My goodness, that was such a fun conversation. That was actually so good. Yeah, no, it was definitely a bot. The next person I'm going to be talking about to is Rot's Min Worker. I'm going to have to ask him how he pronounces his name. And that will be in like 3.5 hours from now. So you're gonna have to wait till I log in to talk to him, and then afterwards we'll be doing Captain Nico. On Thursday we have Mick Fightmaster, which is going to be a really interesting interview because we're going to have a whole bunch of We're gonna have like a panel of wormhole people, and we're gonna be digging into him a little bit. Then we have Drake it in on Friday, and then we have Elenium PS as well on Friday as well. So I will, yeah, I'll post, I'll make a big post tomorrow as well. Cool. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in a couple hours. Bye. If I can find the button. There.